All numbers have place value. Whether you're talking about whole numbers or decimal numbers, each digit represents a certain value, and the values are all based on powers of 10. I have a chart here that will help us see, compared to our decimal, what our place value positions are. Okay? If we have a decimal and we just have one digit in front of a decimal, that's a whole number 1. Okay? We have 5 of them. That means we have a value of 5. If I were to move over another place, okay, that represents my tens. So this means I have 4 tens and 5 ones, which would be like 45. Every time you move to the left of your place value chart, your number is bigger by 1 power of 10. Now, when you go to your decimals, we're breaking into pieces that are smaller, things that are less than 1. So when you move this way on your place value chart, you're actually dividing by powers of 10. So everything is broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. When you look at a place value chart, you have your ones, you have your tens, and you have hundreds and thousands, and it keeps going on and on. If you move to the right, we have similar names, but they're tenths, because things are broken into 10 pieces here. We have hundredths, and we have thousandths. And knowing that information can help us when we are looking at adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing decimals, and it can also help us when it comes to rounding. So let's look at how we can take a number and talk about its place value and also say these numbers correctly. Right here I have 1,245. It doesn't look like there's a decimal point, but anytime you have a whole number, it also has a decimal at the end. We typically don't write the decimal at the end unless there's a decimal part after it. But you can know that any whole number can be turned into a decimal by adding a decimal point and then zeros, okay, because there are no decimal parts to it. All right, so let's look at 1,245. If I were going to put this in my place value chart, I would just put one digit in each box and line up my decimal point. So this has 5 ones, 4 tens, 2 hundreds, 1,000. So it's 1,240, because 4 tens is 40, 5. All right, let's look at our second number here. Again, we'll start by putting our decimal point in the right place and then one digit in each box. Now when you read decimals, it's a little different than when we read our whole number. When we read our whole number, we said each digit's place value. So we said like 1,200. When we read a decimal, you read the whole number as if it were a number. So 692, I'm going to read that as 692. And then whatever the last place value position is, thousandths, that's how you name it. So this would be 692 thousandths. Okay, let's look at one more right here. If you were to say it in, just by what you see, you would say 0.87. But that's not the correct way to say this number. What we would say is we're going to read this part the way it is, 87, and then remember our 7 is in the hundredths place, so this would be 87 hundredths. And then finally, we have a number that has a whole part and a decimal part. So we would put the 3 over here, we'll put our decimal, and we'll put our 6. Now, when you read a number that has wholes and decimal parts, the decimal is actually and. So this is going to be 3 and 6 tenths. Okay? So that's a little bit about decimal place value. Now, when you think about decimal place value, you can use decimal place value to help you estimate. Okay? And if you have numbers that are less than 1, when you go to estimate, you want to think about, is this number closer to 0, a half, or 1? And anytime you have numbers bigger than 1, you want to think about, think about the two numbers, the two whole numbers that would be around it, and which one is it closest to. The easiest way to see this is using a number line. So I'm going to start here with this number, which is 43 hundredths. Okay? If this were 0, and this were 1, and right here is going to be our half. Okay, if I want to think about this in terms of place value, this is 43 hundredths. This half is going to be 50 hundredths. Now 43 hundredths, if I think about it, is going to be right around here. Okay, it's going to be close to 50, okay, 50 hundredths, but not just there yet. If I were going to estimate or round with this number, I want to think about, is it closest to 0, is it closest to half, or is it closest to 1? And I would say for this is closest to a half, so I would estimate or round that this is close to half. Okay, now I put that 0 there, but we don't need it. Okay, this is half. Those two numbers were equivalent. Now let's look at 87 hundredths. 87 hundredths, if I think about this one, okay, again, if this is where 50 hundredths is, this might be 60, 70, 80. 87 hundredths is going to be somewhere over here. And if I look at my number line, I can see, okay, it's between a half and 1, but it's definitely closer to 1, so 87 hundredths would round to 1. Now this last number I have is so small. This is actually 3 thousandths. 3 thousandths. So if I wanted to put in 3 thousandths, this would be 500 thousandths, because that's what half would be. So 3 thousandths is going to be all the way down here. Probably so close I can't even separate my line that much. But again, now that we have it on our number line, we can see it is definitely closest to 0. So I would estimate and round this number to 0. We're going to use the same process for numbers that have whole numbers attached to them, numbers that are greater than 1. But we need to look at the values that are around it. So for example, 2 and 9 tenths. 2 and 9 tenths is going to be between 2 and 3. And right here in the middle, we'll put 2 and a half, 2 and 5 tenths. Now 2 and 9 tenths, this is 5 tenths, 6 tenths, 7 tenths, 8 tenths. 2 and 9 tenths would be about here. So when I look at this and I'm trying to decide how to estimate, is it closer to 2, 2 and a half, or 3, we can see that this one is definitely closest to 3. All right, let's look at 4 and 1 tenth now. So 4 and 1 tenth, if I want to figure that out, this would be 4, this would be 5, and right in the middle would be 4 and 5 tenths. So 4 and 1 tenth would be down here, and this would be 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths. So again, if I want to see what it's closest to, is it closer to 4, 4 and a half, or 5? Looking at my number line, I can see that's definitely closest to 4. See if you can figure out this next one. Okay, let me draw your number line. 12 and 4 tenths. My 12 will be here. My 13 will be here. And 12 and 5 tenths should go here. Now I have 12 and 4 tenths. Where is that going to go? Yep, it's going to go right here. Close to 12 and 5 tenths, but not quite. We'd have 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 12 and 4 tenths. Now the last thing to do is figure out what's it closest to. Is it closer to 12, 12 and a half, or 13? Well, we can see 12 and 4 tenths is really close to 12 and a half. So we would estimate and round that to 12 and a half. Now place value and estimating is going to be really important in our next lesson when we start with our addition and subtraction of decimals. So make sure you really understand this.